All right, guys, looks like we are live. So today we're going to talk about some cultural things and moral degeneracy and some of the underlying philosophies behind it right here on All Minus One after after the intro, folks. Hello, welcome all. This is All Minus One, and my name is Bill. Glad to see you all here. Sorry that I have not been streaming things have been going on. I had some car issues actually, and that kind of changed some things because I am driving for a living. So makes a problem, right? When you got to drive for a living, you have two vehicles, and between my wife and I, looking into getting a third vehicle here in the next couple of months. But I also have an adult daughter, or nearly adult daughter, who is working as well. So that was a big part of it. You'll have to forgive me as well today. Just loading up front here. I'm very tired. I don't feel that bad right now, and I am sipping on a nice little cold brew. But I will tell you that I have had about 5 hours of sleep every night for the last, I don't know, 7, 8 days or something, or less. So if I am, a little aloof, that would be why. But hey, guys, let's get into the material. Well, before that, let's remind everybody that there are alternatives out there wherever you are watching. So I generally assume I'm going to have the largest audience on YouTube because it is the most established platform. But we are on Entropy, which is a nice little free speech site. The record of what you say there will disappear, and you can donate. So that's very nice. I'm also live on Rumble. You can donate there as well. Rumble has me monetized. So if you guys want to do that, you can. You don't have to. No obligations. I'm compelled to do this. I want to talk about these things. I want to be in the conversation, but I also don't really show myself out a lot. I don't do a lot of stuff on the back end to promote myself. So if you guys do like what I make, please, like, share, sub, all that stuff. Sharing is important though for growth. And if I had more time, which I used to, I would try to do more on the back end. But between work, baby, you know, it's hard. It's difficult to have time. Spook says, "I see you really like that video I sent you." Yeah, Spook. Not so much that I really like that video, although it was good, but it was a good jumping off point because it was stuff that was on my mind. I was actually really appreciative of that, and that's what I was going to bring up. That you guys can help me out and getting these shows together always by sending things. So today I'm going to do something I don't always do or normally do. Now, I've had my tweets in here before, but I'm going to have my Twitter on here because I did a Twitter thread this morning that I wanted to include in the show because it was a reaction to some things that I saw going on in the news, some of the things going on and people, what they were saying. So today's show is going to be, philosophical, introspective. There's not going to be a lot of videos, and we're going to focus on the culture and morality. It's like a conversation I had with my boss the other week. He was talking about, different systems of, governance or whatever, and how this isn't like that, and blah, 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 blah. Although I don't think he's correct about a lot of things when he says that, because he's, has certain beliefs about, let's say, fascism or Nazism and what that is, and that it's not really inherently left wing. And I'm like, you're insane. It's revolutionary, it is collectivist, it is authoritarian. Those are all three the primary factors that make something left wing. But regardless, what I told him was, it is not a matter of how you structure your government per se that is important. It is a matter of the society being a moral people, or none of it matters at all. Each individual must be a person of high quality. Like, this was well known in the beginnings of the American founding, but people of high quality, of good moral character, are few and far between. And you'll find that if you get out in the world, in the working world, you'll find most people are immoral. They are selfish. They are self-serving. They will judge you in a heartbeat and then freak out when you judge them. This is the way of the world. But let's get straight into it. So Spook sent me a video that this guy covers an article. I'm going to play the end of the video that he sent me because the guy makes commentary at the very end. It's only like a minute or two clip, but he reads the article, and I can read the article for myself and make my own commentary. So that's what we're going to do. And so, Spook, once again, appreciate it. You guys can always send me things. You can email me. You can find that on the YouTube channel. It's in the description somewhere. There's a million little tabs on YouTube. It's in there, probably around in the about section, if I'm not mistaken. Um, of course, um, many of you already have my Twitter, but if you don't, you'll be able to see that later on. I'm going to be doxing myself, my real name, um, which I never really cared that much about. I just didn't want the drama. Um, and then, of course, there is a Discord, which if you guys want that, just let me know and I will get you a link because as Discord links go, they expire. So I can put that in the chat real quick at any point. And you know what? I just realized I didn't have Rumble up. I want to get Rumble back up. I must close it out by mistake so that I can check the chat there. And I will say, guys, one other thing, since I've been gone for like 2 weeks or whatever, however long it's been. Um, okay, there it is. All right. I am working on something that I'm working on a bigger video, a kind of elaborate video, and the way I see it, I probably won't live stream it. I might edit it. It might take me a while to get out. So I spent a lot of last week trying to do that last weekend. And then, I had to end up working last Sunday. I worked yesterday. I don't normally work Saturdays. I have to work next Saturday. And the week after that, I'm going to be out of town for a wedding. So again, bear with me with the streaming schedule. I really do want to be consistent, but life is what it is. So you guys will have to catch me in spurts for now, at least until we get where we want to be, my wife and I can leave this job or work less hours or whatever it is. Again, this job that I'm taking now isn't something that I need to do. It's something that I'm doing to help advance our goals here in the next few years. So enough about me. Let's talk about you. No, anyways, so this article from the Catholic Herald was sent to me by old Spook, and it says, if men will not be governed by the Ten Commandments, and it's a famous quote from G.K. Chesterton. If men will not be governed by the Ten Commandments, they will be governed by the 10,000 Commandments. So said G.K. Chesterton, articulating in a memorable way the truth that a society made up of those who will not govern their own moral behavior will sooner or later become less free as the government resorts to an ever more coercion and regulation to minimize the consequences of unrestrained human sinfulness. Now, there's a little phrase there. It says sooner or later we'll become less free. Now, how is it that self-restraint and self-control is freedom? Right? Because people will postulate this. They'll put this forth as if you controlling yourself and not acting like a heathen is you repressing yourself. This is the MAPS, the minor attracted persons, right? They're being oppressed and oppressing society by not diddling kids, right? This is all of the women that need to go, bang 1,500 dudes before they settle down and get married. Which, by the way, any woman that participates in that is mentally unstable, folks. Women just naturally do not do that. Now, some women in today's society, because of the programming, may be a bit promiscuous, right? At least in the Western world. But when you're just sleeping with dozens and dozens of men, you have a deep, deep problem with your soul. And vice versa. If you're a man and doing the same thing, now it's different for men, but if you're a man and doing the same thing, there is something deeply wrong with your soul. And I can speak to that because I had something deeply wrong with my soul. I really did. And I get it. Um, and part of it was because of the quality of women that is being churned out by our manufactured society. So, what's the consequence? Well, of course, the consequence is a government that continues to restrict its people because they're not restricting themselves. I think it was Tacitus, if I'm not mistaken, who said that the more laws there are, the more immoral the people. And you think about that. I think this is an aphorism often nowadays as our authorities attempt, with little success, to use the law to contain forms of bad behavior, which, until very recently, were widely understood to be perverse of manners and morals transmitted organically through a non political social institution like the family, churches, and youth organizations, and so on. Guys, I think I'm going to try something here. Hmm. That definitely don't work. I mean, that's the only other thing I can do is put myself off screen, but I prefer not to do that. I guess we're going back to this. I was just trying to see how I can make it a little bit bigger. Anyways, a couple of months back, for example, Transport for London began putting posters up on the underground and buses reminding men that intrusive staring was unacceptable and might be reported to the police as a form of sexual harassment. In April, a senior British transport police officer reiterated that they would prosecute people suspected of such behavior. More recently, posters have appeared targeted at men, insisting that they refuse to tolerate their friends' sexist and misogynistic jokes on the grounds that such jokes are the first steps on the road to committing sexual assault or violence against women. That is absurd. A joke is a joke. And the reason why it's a joke and the reason why it's humorous is because it is deplorable, because it is so painful and so bad and so awful that we chuckle at it because that is how we cope. And the only other reason why you really think something is joyous that you want to laugh about, or the only reason why you want to laugh or whatever is because of actual joy. And that's the problem here is people don't understand the difference in laughter of joy and laughter of sadness. And I'm actually a fan of dark humor, big fan. Being a guy who has spent his life, military, law enforcement, security, that kind of stuff, working around medical personnel, a lot of dark humor in that field because that's how you cope. And people hear it who aren't initiated, I would say, who aren't part of that, and they don't get it. Much like when I was younger, like I really despise bullies, so I don't really or used to not ever really tease people or uh, you know, give them a hard time for fun and knowing that I'm joking with them, right? I'm not trying to be mean spirited. Um, but over time in those environments, I understood that that was a thing, right? And of course, we know, men, this is how we deal with each other. This is how we sort each other out, because the weak ones, when we don't want around, if I can't joke with you and whatever, then I can't get anything done, right? If you think about it, if you think about like say the differences between men and women and how we acknowledge each other and how we change our inflection or tone of voice depending on our mood, right? And you say something to a woman and she snaps at you, right? You know that she took that in a poor way. Now, maybe she might have just been in a bad mood and whatever. Maybe there's an apology or whatever comes along. But, and it's the same for men as well. You know when someone is being real or authentic and snapping at you. Children and very, very foolish, stupid people, low IQ people don't understand. In fact, low IQ people have the highest amount of distrust out there. High IQ people actually have a high level of trust, which is absurd to me, but I think it's a notion that they don't understand. Um, they don't understand the realities of the world. They tend to be elitist, and of course, they are uh, secluded in their little bubbles. So they don't understand how cutthroat the world actually is a lot of the times, especially when you're insulated by a lot of wealth and you have a lot of security that comes with that, right? Like land or actual physical security, guys with guns, that kind of stuff. Um, but the reality is that life is a matter of processing these things and not just being one or the other, right? Again, this is just an overall overarching look at things. People who are lower in IQ are less trustworthy, which is why they will often, when you interact with them, mistake your intention as nefarious. It's because they're stupid. Sometimes your actions might be nefarious, but I mean when you're not being that way, when you're not being a malevolent individual, and they feel that way, they interpret it that way, right? And more intelligent people are more likely to go, well, I think, John, he was just joking around. Jimmy, he's okay. Blah blah blah. Or they excuse it like I often do with people. Oh, they're just in a bad mood or whatever. Um, but you need to keep that in mind. Again, I'm not telling you how to think about that per se, but just understand that that's a reality, right? And people mistake each other all the time. So joking, anyways, I got on a tangent there about the joke, but joking is just a joke, right? We do it all the time. That's why I do the Justify the memes. That's why I push the limits on it as much as I can. Um, you know, if you watch a show from a year ago, it's a little different. A little different. I mean, it's the same, but I mean, as far as my demeanor and what I'm willing to put on there and not on there, but it's because I want to see where I can take it, and I'm not very serious most of the time on that show. Um, so, anyways, back to the article here. Such initiatives are cleverly well meaning, but the fact that they need to happen at all shows the steep cost of our endless war against limits and constraints on behavior and our increasing reliance on the pliability of woolly concepts of consent as the only benchmark for morality. Well, consent isn't a benchmark for morality. I can consent to immoral things, right? You know, if I commit suicide, I have consented to my death by myself. Um, I still find that to be an immoral thing, an immoral act. It's the taking of life, and it's also, at least biblically speaking, it would be a sin that not just took a life, caused death, but puts you in a position to be in mortal judgment. So in the bad old days of repression, so called the public sphere was largely kept free of sexually explicit behavior and references. Um, Reticence and modesty regarding sex and indeed most personal matters were considered the order of the day. This was rooted, of course, in Britain's long Christian history. It undoubtedly had disadvantages, but it also meant that in public, you were unlikely to be confronted with sexual imagery and sexualized behavior. Now, undoubtedly, it had disadvantages. How? First, let's get this straight. You always pay the piper. There is always a cost to your actions. So if you don't know the actual story of the Pied Piper, the Pied Piper marched the rats out of the village, right? And then afterwards, they refused to pay him. So he then marched the children out of the village and into a cave, I believe, and kept them there for a ransom, something like that. I think another version, he had them disappear forever or even walk off a cliff potentially. I don't know. There are different iterations of that story. But what I can tell you is that there is a price to everything. This idea of justice is a universal human idea, is a universal religious idea. Even in religions that don't believe in a ultimate judgment, such as Hinduism, believe in karmatic justice, that you come back, that your consciousness comes back in another form, and whatever evil you were in the past keeps you in lower forms. It's actually how they justify their uh, evil caste and communistic type system that they have. Um, Although India is getting away from that to some degree. Where was I at here? I don't mean that. I don't mean that what we now call sexual harassment is intrusive staring were unknown, or intrusive staring were unknown. Sorry, but rather that they were unusual and many people literally unthinkable because of the social and legal norms in place. I don't agree. It's unusual to certain people who are highly civilized. It depends on where you live. It depends on your environment. If you're in a club trying to scam for women, giving a stare, if you know how to do it properly, might be a good thing. Um, it's the weird gazing, that people do when they're on the subway. But again, it is generally this is directed to minorities who are also this wonderful protected class by the left. So it's an odd thing that they have to put out these PSAs. I mean, we know so much so that the problem with grooming, and I don't mean in schools, I mean the grooming gangs that they've had in the UK, is so much so ignored because of the potential of racisms. Because that accusation has somehow become the ultimate sin of all sins. Now, I don't like the idea of judging people based on, superficial characteristics. And they're not completely superficial, but it has nothing to do with the bearing of your character, right? Like they're not completely superficial because I'm going to get a sunburn a lot easier than a black guy. That's not completely superficial. I am a short guy, a small guy rather. Um, you're going to look at me superficially and understand that I'm not as strong as somebody who's like, I don't know, 6'4" and 300 pounds of muscle, right? So yeah, you can make judgments on that, but your character, that's a whole nother thing. And I wait and reserve judgment of all people's character. I get to know them. And then I can tell who they are. I can see, you know, what do they say? How do they act? How are they hypocritical? Right? Those things. Now we think we know better. We have what can feel like an almost pathological openness about every aspect of people's personal lives, and reservations about a sexualized public sphere are regarded as old fashioned and puritanical. No. Yes and no. No, in that perspective, that um, idea that this is puritanical and everyone believes this is manufactured. It is the synthetic society that we live in, the plastic society that we live in, that has created that. But in truth, most people don't believe that. And those that do, right? Those that do who are promoting it, they're slaves. They are slaves to this system and they are slaves to sin. This leads, however, to a chaotic and confusing situation for many people. We are enjoined to be open about sex. Pornography is widely available. Highly explicit sex scenes can be shown on TV and film, and huge billboards can feature people in revealing underwear, but personal interactions are governed by very strict rules. Speaking of huge billboards, um, PETA loves to put naked people, celebrities, up on billboards to for animal rights, not to wear fur. And then they murder millions of animals every year. They euthanize them because they have nowhere for them to go. My wife's org, White Coat Waste, just had a very decent editorial or something, whatever it was. They thought it was potentially going to be a hit piece, but a piece released over on BuzzFeed News. BuzzFeed's actually, I think, trying to rebuild its reputation or something. I don't know. But the impact that they have had with so little money. I think PETA has like 50, $60 million. I'm not going to tell you what White Coast budget is, but it's not that. It's not. It's a very small small fraction of that. Um, but you're talking about a dozen people who have had more impact on these experimental, lab torture sessions of these animals and waste of taxpayer money and exposing the bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci than PETA ever has. But see, it's about priorities. Do you actually want to get something done, or do you want to grandstand? Do you want to be Gnostic? Do you want to pretend so everyone can think that you have that right morality? Let me check chat real quick. I just saw. Not trying to leave you guys hanging here. Just want to check. Looks like you're having a little conversation. Spook says, Bill, you've already fixed yourself about 10 times already. Yeah, well, that's a continual process, man. That's part of my faith. It's continual growth, continual whatever. Oh, you meant dox myself. Yeah, oh, no doubt. I dox myself every time I stream. Um, it's a matter of I didn't really dox myself, just giving out my name, right? But it's a matter of, all of a sudden, if people want to come after me, I don't really care so much. It's more my family. I got all women in my house. They take things a lot differently than I do. So it's really about, trying to protect them from nonsense. And while my wife was pregnant, I was kind of a little concerned about that. I don't really have the kind of traction that most people are going to come and try and do something, but you never know, man. You never know. In any case, let's continue on. Approached in a rationalistic way, this is defensible. It is all about personal choice and freedom, modern people would say, but this is absolutely naive. I agree. Freedom is important. I talk about freedom and I say I'm a classical liberal. I say these things because uh, the classical liberals had a relationship with God. God was in their lives. It informed their morality and how things needed to go and how they should treat other people and how they should dictate laws and how laws should be not just dictated, I should say, but even formed and that the people themselves would have a say in it. Because Christianity is a faith of freedom to free you from sin and slavery in the grasp of Hasatan himself. It is to allow you to move yourself away from those things that actually oppress you. And what we're being taught today is that all the evil and sinful things are not oppressive, that they're good for you and they will fulfill you. Yet we actually have scientific data that suggests otherwise. That people that are in married relationships, that have families and kids, and I'm talking about all throughout their lifetimes, are happier than those who live in hedonism. You guys, let me know. I see a drop here in viewership, and there's a storm going on outside, so let me know if my stream is messing up or anything. I'm going to look into some better internet here soon, as we just got some fiber optic installed in the area, so maybe that'll fix some issues I have on occasion. But let me know. Put an F in the chat if I go away, any of that kind of stuff. Let's see here. It says, it does not suit human nature as it really exists. The Christian anthropology understands that appetites, once aroused and indulged, are hard to control, and that we cannot compartmentalize them so easily. Not only that, once you essentially sin, you have a taste for it, and it is easier to do every single time. Spook says W for everything is okay. Well, that doesn't go with the meme, Spook, but it's none of my business. Anyways, We realize that there is a fundamental contradiction in wanting a public life that is as relaxed as possible about all forms of sexual display. Let me read this again. We realize that there is a fundamental contradiction in wanting a public life that is relaxed as possible about all forms of sexual display. Okay, what is that contradiction? And where chivalry is ridiculed and looked down upon, but also one where men are enjoined to behave towards women in public as if it still were 1952. Yeah, because this isn't about the liberation of anything, it's about power. And in the process of gaining power, the programmers of the society are basically short circuiting everybody. They're empowering them and then stripping it away. They're just cutting them off. It's what they did to women and feminism with the trans movement, right? And trans athletics. And as they do that, and they tell women to be sluts and whores and whatever else so they can never pair bond appropriately with their husbands, well, then they can go, look, broken person, here I am, the state. I'm here to help you, little one. Here's a hand. Why don't you reach out and grab it, and I will lift you up? And people do, because they're stupid. They don't read anything. They read what these people want them to read. They read the instruction manuals on how to brainwash themselves. It's what they do. And that's pretty much, when I say that, that's pretty much reading like, all the commie writings, all the postmodernists for the most part, and there's just a dearth of history in philosophy that just shatters all of this outside of even the religious perspective. So we're going to come back to women in the 1950s, by the way, here after a while. Probably be the last thing I'll leave you with today. But I got a lot to get through before that. It is also very easy to have good things when the religious and social norms that underpin them have been kicked away. And that was it. That was it. So it's a pretty short article, but I'm going to play this clip. This gentleman makes a nice little point, and then I'm going to transition into another little article on a similar idea. So let's listen to this real quick.
That article, I think many Muslims would and traditional Christians would recognize the profound insight into that. Now, what about Islam? Well, as we know, Islam is characterized by its modesty. Ibn Abbas reported in a hadith, the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, said, truly every religion has a character, and the character of Islam is modesty. Abu Huraira reported, the Messenger of God.
That should be the character of Christianity as well. And it's kind of sad that a lot of modern Christians are they're not very modest. Humility is a very, very direct commandment from Christ. It is in the Sermon on the Mount, folks. It is in the Beatitudes, the blessings, the first things Christ says. And if you aren't aware, Moses came down from Mount Sinai with 10 commandments, right? Yeah. Well, Jesus reestablished the truth, and he sat on a mountain and he said, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are peacemakers. Blessed are those who are meek. All right. But as he does this, you can read it. You can read the language. It's not just a blessing upon them. He's commanding you to be those things. And it's in the next 3 chapters that make up the Sermon on the Mount. You can actually notate how he's repeating those points. I've done it. I've done it in I'll say a sermon, not a minister, but I've done it in a lesson at church before. I've done it for people. It's not hard, and that did not come to me by any means of study. That was something that God gave to me. But it was something that was easy to see once my eyes were open. So, but one of the things that's very respectable about the Muslim world is they have not fully caved in to this cultural push. Now, I think there are a lot of Western Muslims that have, and of course there are the Islamists, which are the jihadists, if you would, which not a fan of, not a fan of killing people for whatever reason.
Peace and blessings be upon him, said, faith has 60 to 70 branches, the best of which is to declare that there is no God but Allah, the least of which is to remove something harmful from the road, and modesty is a branch of faith. There are many, many examples one could give from numerous hadith and statements in the Quran to the same effect, of course. In the West, however, many people equate dressing modestly as being oppressed. However, many female reverts, these are converts to Islam, report that when they began dressing modestly after converting to Islam, they felt more empowered than ever before. One said, I became in control of my body and was newly able to choose who could see me. Contrary to the common narrative in the West, dressing modestly has empowered me and given me a newfound sense of security and confidence. And as we know, in Islam, the concept of haya or modesty is a distinctive quality of the faith. Many Muslims observe modesty both in their outward appearance and also through their inner self in regard to their actions and character. Men and women alike are commanded in the Quran to observe modesty. And this, I think, is another instance of how Muslims in the West can contribute to the public good by their wholesome example. Until next time.
So that was from the Blogging Theology channel, and thanks for sending me that, Spook. So again, he reads the article I just went through, pretty much straightforward, and just gives that little bit of commentary at the end. There should be proofs of your morality in your life. I'm going to repeat that. There should be proofs of your morality in your life. There's a whole sect of Christianity. There's multiple sects, but a whole branch, sphere of Christianity that thinks you don't have to express morality at all. Yet Christ, your master, said that you will know them by their fruit, the fruits that they bear. And that reminds me, or brings me to this article. Wait, why is it doing this? I guess I'm going to have to re-upload it. It should share, but I haven't streamed in like 2 weeks, so you never know. You never know what's going on. I should just be able to click through and share different tabs on my other screen, but whatever. I don't know. Maybe StreamYard's changed something. Whatever became of sin? Now, this is about a book that Carl Menger wrote. He was a very well-renowned psychologist and ethicist to some degree. And this question is very important because the programmers of our society, the creators of it, those who control the media, who are brainwashing you on a regular basis, and I literally mean that, they are controlling the narrative, they are the gatekeepers, they are brainwashing you. They would have you believe that this is all superstition and hoobly Jew, right? A bunch of nonsense. It's malarkey. And Sure, sure. But is it really? What are we really saying here? Well, I think what we're really saying is that do what thou willst. The highest morality and ethics, that is, according to those who are programming our society, is to do whatever you please, to be as evil and hedonistic as you would like, to basically rise with the will to power to take all and conquer. I mean, think about this dichotomy here that I I throw it out there a lot because I find it so absurd that someone would come to me and be like, "Your God isn't real, blah blah blah. Nothing you believe is real." And I'm like, "Well, you know, I'm not a nice guy. Now I am a nice guy, but I'm not a nice guy, guys. I restrain myself a lot, and I restrain myself for fear of God. You want to take away that restraint from me? All right, what gloves will come off, buddy. That's not going to be a fun time for you. I promise. I promise." And it's not because I'm some tough guy, right? It's nothing like that at all. It's because if God doesn't restrain me, I know my ability to go into excess. I know my ability to commit violence, my potentiality, I would say, right? And and I abhor violence. I don't like using violence. I don't like when I get mad and yell at people. I don't like myself, but I know I can do it. And I know once I give into that sin that I can continue to do it and I will grow stronger and better at it. And you have no idea what doors you are trying to open. Or maybe the engineers, the programmers of the synthetic society absolutely do. In 1973, the world-renowned psychiatrist, excuse me, in 1973, the world-renowned psychiatrist Carl Menger wrote a book entitled Whatever Became of Sin. In his book, the doctor projected a day would come when sin would no longer be an element of human behavior, of human vernacular. He speculated that the explanation of sin and wrongdoing would be replaced by rationalizations excusing individual accountability. Menger predicted the term sin would be replaced with words like illness, disorder, dysfunction, syndrome, etc. The human condition would be excused as a product of biochemistry, environment, experience, and trauma. Keep that in mental note, guys, especially environment. It's a big one. They love that. That's what all of social engineering is about. If they can prove that all of humanity is only about the environment, we are not bound to nature. And if we're not bound to nature, then there is no God. And that's what this is about, right? That's really what this is about. But the environment, we'll come back to that 100% because the environment is important, but it is not everything. He projected that even crime would go unpunished as criminal activity would be justified and minimized as a result of some medical abnormality for which one could not be held responsible. Now, you have people like Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who teach at UCLA, I believe, who is by all means a very intelligent and brilliant man, and at the same time an atheist, and he doesn't even believe in free will. He thinks you're just a little series of switches of events and whatever. He talks about people doing evil things, and he's saying, "Oh, sometime in the future, we'll just be able to give them a pill, and they won't have any desire to do it." It's absurdity. I'm sorry. You can't even control basic things in human behavior with medicine. Like they'll sell you a bag of goods, they'll tell you that the SSRIs and those kind of things are very helpful, which maybe for very few people, perhaps they are. You know, Jordan Peterson, very educated man, knows a lot about the literature, works in the field. Started taking benzos, got addicted to them. Benzos mimic alcohol in the brain. You know that when you take benzos, or sorry, when you detox from alcohol, they give you benzos. Yeah. Benzodiazepine is a mimicker of alcohol in a lot of ways, the way your body processes it and functions with it. And because of that, that withdrawal will potentially kill you, just like alcohol. Some of the only two substances I'm aware of, and I'm pretty informed about this stuff. I used to, you know, uh, I don't know, work in a jail and do drug tests for a living. It's kind of like I'm aware of how these things work a little bit. I have to used to deal with people withdrawing on a regular basis every day of my life, 6 days a week. Mm. In any case, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on from this article, but I, I wanted to bring it up because it's a very very important concept and idea, and of course, I highly encourage you to get the book. Hmm. Yeah, this is not going to be easy for me today, guys, because I'm not trying to slow down the show here. I don't know why it doesn't want to allow me to share things from just my tabs, and I have to keep going back in the StreamYards. Not quite understanding this. All right. Spook says the Baptists, right? They're the guys who believe you show belief in God once and you're forgiven for say forever. Actually, the Baptists are they're not a uniform organization. There's the Southern Baptist Convention, which is a group of churches that basically are under a banner, but they none of them teach uniformly the same thing. There is no actual doctrine per se. Um, but you will find that a lot because many Baptists are what are called in the Reformed theology, which is Calvinism. And even Calvin didn't even believe in the stuff that these people, claim that he discovered. So, and that it's pretty clear in his writings. Calvin was confused because Calvin was indoctrinated by Augustine, just like Luther was indoctrinated by Augustine. And I'm telling you right now, Augustine is not someone to be admired. It's interesting how even secular people will say that Augustine was some great scholar. He's considered one of the greatest scholars in the Western tradition. He is not. He was, I guess, very well written. I guess he had some sort of good points. He writes The City of God, trying to talk about how Rome falling apart and degeneracy is supposed to be the city of God. That's not a good Christian perspective from his time period, because all the Christians prior to him wrote that Christians have no kingdom here on this earth. They have no nation, that we are sojourners, that we have one king in Christ. But yeah, I mean, Augustine, the greatest mind ever. Anyways, I digress. So from that article we just saw, it talked about the mental health of these people and the criminals, and it wouldn't be sinful. Well, you guys might have heard about a mass shooting this weekend. Happened the other day in Buffalo. I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to talk about the reactions to that. A bunch of people pointing to Tucker Carlson because, we have a million and one sophists out there. But what I am going to talk about is this briefly. Gang leader who got $1,000 bail for a stolen gun 4 days after getting out of federal prison is behind mass shooting, Chicago police say. A mass shooting that left one man dead and 4 injured in the backyard on Tuesday afternoon is part of a weeks-long gang war fueled by high-ranking gang members who paid under $1,000 or just $1,000. Sorry, guys, to get out of jail for the felony case in March. And then he went on and proceeded to shoot people. Of course, there's a story on the side here. Carjacker strolls through West Loop wearing a ski mask and a 70-degree day as cops investigate. Yeah. I mean, this is Chicago. What do you expect? There's mass shooting there all the time. It doesn't quite fit the narrative. Because, see, this guy in Buffalo, apparently he went and he targeted minorities, so he is evil. But when you're a minority and you're killing other people in gang violence, you're fine. You're good. We'll just ignore that. Not in the narrative, right? And that's the thing, is it's all about narrative. It's all about getting you to believe in what they have to say. It's all about gatekeeping. As an example. Well, that's the end of the video. Here we go. The center is the channel I pulled this from.
Well, but there has to be, I think, some sort of way in which we can sort through information that passes some basic truthiness tests, and those that we have to discard because they just don't have any basis in anything that's actually happening in the world. And that's hard to do, but I think it's going to be necessary. It's going to be possible.
The epidemic of malicious fake news.
Say that the scales were tipped unfairly through fake news.
Is this the year of fake news?
Fake news.
Fake news is shared more than ever.
Fake news stories.
So much fake news out there.
Fake news.
The growing and booming business of creating fake news.
So-called fake news.
Fake news stories.
Fake news websites.
To eliminate any hoaxes or fake news content on Facebook.
A fake news story, fake news conspiracy.
The fake news as
Making fake news
into the fake news phenomenon.
There has to be consequences for any of these people. The FBI should be investigating these people, and they should be sued for slander, libel, do whatever is possible.
Growing problem of fake news.
Fake news is getting out there.
Industrialized fake news operations.
Media that focus on scandals and spread fake news to smear politicians risk becoming like people who have a morbid fascination with excrement.
Following this week, fake news that
being a fake news story.
When fake news stories use the name.
Julian, fake news. All across the board.
The fake news trend
is fake news, flat out fake news, and
fake news and false information. And
the problem now is there are no gatekeepers. Anybody can set up a website.
And just that it was a crazy idea. They wouldn't have come forward and told a journalist that they were forming these secret task forces.
So this video continues, but here's my question. What gives you the right to be a gatekeeper in the first place? And I know the answer that most people will get. Well, I went to college. I had this education. I was granted this. I earned it this way or that way. You earn the right to be the arbiter of all truth. You earn the right to decide what other people are allowed to ingest as far as their knowledge. You never earned that. You took it, and you decided that you were that person. Spook's talking, asking me. He's like, "Man, I didn't know you'd stopping outright alcohol." Well, I'll put it this way, Spook. I've dealt with a lot of drunks in my life, and I know that the level of alcohol, when people talk about people being alcoholics, half the time it really annoys me. I know what the clinical definition of alcoholism is, and it's stupid. It's part of the synthetic society. Ancient peoples drank all the time, all day long. They usually mixed wine and water. It was part of a staple of their food, right? Of their calories. Our body burns alcohol first, according to the sugarholics, the people that would tell you not to eat meat and fat. And I'm not anti-sugar, by the way. I think it should be a more minimized part of your diet, though, or you should prioritize it in fruit. Regardless, Those people will tell you that, oh yeah, well of course sugar, is what you need to eat because it's the preferred fuel of your body because your body burns it up first. No, actually, the preferred fuel of your body, by that logic, is alcohol because your body burns that up first. The truth is, man, I knew guys that had to drink like a big old thing, like a whiskey, right? Like a fifth or something. And they had to do that just to be normal. Because when you're an alcoholic, a true alcoholic, you are not at baseline normal like everyone else is when they're sober until you've had a bunch of drinks. That's how bad that disease is. And they won't be drunk until they drink 2 or 3 of those. I know when I was a heavy drinker for a while in the past, I could easily drink 15 beers. 15. And I'm not talking about like over the course of hours and hours and hours. I'm like talking about in the evening over, I don't know, maybe 6 hours or something. And still be fine. I might pass out or whatever. The beer is less strong than straight liquor. But I couldn't give you the exact numbers. I just know, again, armchair philosophy time. In my experience, these guys drink a lot. And I mean a lot. So much so that one of the guys came in year after year, knew him pretty well. He'd fight with us when he come in drunk. Otherwise, he's a nice guy. He had told me he hadn't been in there like 4 years. And I'm like, Lewis, you've been here. You were just here last year, dude. And he's like, oh, no, man. He's like, you haven't been here in 4 years. I haven't been here in 4 years, man. And so I looked up his record, and sure enough, he was there last year. I was right. But his mind was gone. And I think that was the last time I saw him. I'm pretty sure, because what happened was he went out because he drinks all the time. Doesn't drink while he's in jail because he can't. But he goes out, starts getting back on the sauce. He decided he was going to go out and go drinking in a homeless encampment. He had a house, mind you, but that's what these guys do. They decide they're going to go out and go drink for the day, and they're going to go drink around the homeless people in the little tent cities and stuff. I don't know why. I guess it's fun. That's where all the drugs are or something. I don't know. So he goes out and does this, passes out and falls asleep. It's winter time. It's negative 20 degrees out. That's Fahrenheit. We don't do Celsius here. Anyways, still died of exposure, right? You have to drink a lot for that to be the case. You have to do a lot of stuff for that to be the case. So, but yeah, I know guys that, like I said, many guys, you'll go through a period of hallucination. This is the first time I can't speak today properly, but hey, it comes out. Hallucinate, and they'll hallucinate for a week or two. Now, I didn't know this till recently. This is called DTs. And part of this too, they actually will shake. They have tremors and stuff. I didn't understand this till very recently, actually, in the last, I don't know, 2-3 years. Might have been a little bit sooner. I think it was before my wife and I were married. So it's been about 4 years. But the reason why they hallucinate is because the alcohol has suppressed their sleep cycle so much, their dream cycle, that then in a waking state, their body has to catch back up. So when that alcohol is gone out of their system, they are literally in a waking dream. They're sleepwalking. And I've seen it last for up to 2 weeks. So it's crazy. And they have no idea what's going on. And they don't remember any of it. And anyways, that's a side tangent, right? Ignatius, that's the reason why you don't like eating when you're drinking. I'm not quite sure what you mean there. I don't like to eat when I drink because I don't like having the the nasty bowel movement the next day. Because you were talking about how I was talking about how alcohol, right, digest. Yes. And what happens is that your body has to process it first. So all that food sits in your gut, and then it kind of like rots and ferments and stuff. And that's why it's, you get some nasty bowel movements the next day. But you can't eat and drink if you do it right. I think. I mean, I'm able to, but I try not to drink that much very often anymore. So, although I did have 2 beers last night. 2 big beers, so I guess they were technically I had 4 beers because they were 2 24-ounces, or not 4 beers, it's 2.5, what? Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, so that's the deal on that spook. I don't know the detailed literature, but I'm sure you could find it. Again, that has been my experience in it. But let's get back to the topic of the day, and that if men will not be governed by the 10 commandments. Now, mind you, I am not actually a believer in the use of the Decalogue, that is what it is called, the 10 commandments in Christianity. For Christians, it's actually not appropriate for Christians because the new commandments were passed down from Christ. Now, they're an extension of the old commandments, and the old commandments in the Old Testament tell us, colors us a perspective. But what Christ is the fulfillment of all that was to come from the Old Testament. That's why it is we call it the Old Testament because it speaks to us, but really the better translation, or better, not translation, the better title would be the old or past covenant, the covenant between God and man. And so there was a new covenant between God and man, a new declaration and a new agreement. And Christ even says in the Beatitudes on the Sermon on the Mount, right? He says right after he says all of that stuff, that he is not there to destroy what was before, but to fulfill it. And he said that you had to be more righteous than the scribes and the Pharisees. Now that's interesting because people think all kinds of things about what that is, but what he is saying, I'm telling you, what that means is that he has fulfilled it, because the Old Testament was a foreshadowing, as all the Christians talk about, Paul very specifically, of what was to come. And they missed it because the Jews were unfaithful, which is why God said he would curse them and make them a byword amongst the nations. It's all in the Bible. And this is also why the blessings, it's not that Jews can't have the blessings, but if you don't accept Christ, right, then there's a problem there. But the blessings were passed on to the Gentiles, the dogs. The Gentiles were seen as unclean beasts, swine. But God was sick of people not listening to him, so he brought them in anyways. And that's kind of the point. It's kind of the point. That no matter how terrible you've been, God will forgive. And he will bring you in. But he requires allegiance as well. It's not like you can just get to go, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, oh, yeah, God, thank you for forgiving me. All right, I'm going to turn around and go be a whoremonger and murder a couple people. No, it doesn't work that way. John 15, you have to remain on the vine of Christ. But as I was saying, the shooter in Buffalo right now is being used because, well, seems to be racially motivated. I haven't been able to get a hold of the manifesto. Like, again, I've been working, worked Friday till midnight, or actually, I got out like 12:30 on Friday, I think, or something like that. I don't even remember now. I worked last night till 12:30 or 1. Yeah, so just, bear in mind, guys, I can't always get everything together. Doing the best I can, though. But in response to that, I thought I would talk about what's actually going on there. Because everyone's saying, this is Tucker Carlson inciting the Great Replacement. The Great Replacement. It's not real. Yeah. Look at Europe. Look what's happened to Europe. This isn't about religion or someone being black or brown or anything else. It's about Europeans who have their own distinct culture, who have had an influx of people who are not from Europe having their own distinct culture invade them, and then the Europeans have to suppress their culture in order to accommodate their guests. Now, I believe in being a gracious host. Again, it's part of my religion. But accommodating my guests does not destroy my values, my cultures, my morals. I'm not going to accommodate my guest and allow him to sleep with my wife, right? Now, there are some cultures that do that, but not in this one, not in mine. So that brings me to this, because what you're dealing with is sophism. And so the sophists were a philosophical group who are in every way exactly like the modern radical left. And not only are they like the modern radical left, but the modern radical left takes its roots from the sophist via Hegel. And you go, Bill, how can this be? I've never heard this before. I don't know. Read a book, dude. I'm telling you now, and I'm going to show you. The sophists held no values other than winning and succeeding. But they were not true believers in the myths of the Greeks, but would use references and quotations from the tales for their own purposes. Sound familiar? Does it sound like what's going on today with all the Hollywood rewriting everything and making it woke? They were secular atheists, relativists, and cynical about religious beliefs and all traditions. They believed and taught that might makes right. Sounds familiar. Spook, that was a bad. Well, my boy's getting flagged for anti-Semitism. Yeah, right. I know. And that's the thing is, I don't care. I don't care where you come from, man. I care about your character always, always. I don't get me wrong. I know culture affects your character, but there are a lot of people of good character in bad cultures as well, and that reject those cultures. So keep that in mind. They were pragmatists, not so. Before, as I use this word, this is used as an adjective, but not as a actual descriptor of a pragmatist, because pragmatism is an American philosophy that wasn't invented until the 1800s. Okay. And we use pragmatism in the vernacular to be methodical or detailed. But what pragmatism actually means, or is actually about, is a philosophy of usefulness, not. So I'm working on this video, and I'm going to talk a lot about Baudrillard and whatever else. And I thought about naming it the pragmatist perspective of Baudrillard, because I think of myself a little bit like of a pragmatist. The utility is very important to me. But I don't know, because that might be too confusing. I like plays on words though and stuff, and that probably goes way over other people's heads. But for me, it's a little play on things, because Baudrillard is the furthest thing from a pragmatist, yet he's kind of pragmatic. So, anyways, I just want that to be a differentiation, though. This isn't a school of philosophy. I don't want you to be confused about that if you aren't aware of various philosophies. Pragmatism is a modern philosophy. They're using it as a descriptor of being thorough or practical, primarily practical. So they were pragmatists, trusting in whatever works to bring about the desired end at whatever the cost. Their concerns were not with truth, but with practical knowledge. They practiced rhetoric in order to persuade, not to disclose the truth. So again, their concerns were not with the truth, but with practical knowledge. Well, what is practical knowledge? Well, if you're not worried about the truth, which should be your highest value, in my opinion, it's my highest value. and that's because God is truth. Now we could talk about love and all those other things as well, but love is manipulative. You have to have a mature understanding of what love is. So I'm not going to go down that route. Truth, though, is simple. Truth is what is. Truth is the understanding of existence of things and the reality in which they are in. But see, the modern sophists, we call them postmodernists, they've decided there is no truth, and they get this straight from the sophist because it's about what the practical knowledge is. And that pragmatic approach is about, and that knowledge is about how they can manipulate and control and how they can get the society in which they want. That's the practical knowledge they're talking about. How can we market and manipulate? Their art, that is the art, the craft of being a sophist, was to persuade the crowd and not to convince people of the truth. I will always point to Eric Michael Dyson when he debated Jordan Peterson some years ago. And it wasn't a debate. It was Eric Michael Dyson being a sophist. He is the epitome of a modern day sophist and admits to being a postmodernist. Imagine that. They move thought from cosmology and cosmogony and theogony, stories of gods and the universe, to a concern for humanity. Okay? Are you tracking this? Now, I don't spell everything out because I expect you guys to think for yourself. I don't want to tell you what you think, honestly. I don't want a bunch of people on my channel going, oh, yeah, yeah, Bill. Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're 100% right. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes. I'm not your cult leader. But if you're tracking what is being said here and you understand what is happening in the West and all over the world, mind you, but primarily in the West, it was secular humanism that divided man from God in the West. Concerns of humanity, concerns of the self. And then what you get is a buildup of the ego, and you get nihilistic thinking, and then people just want to destroy and burn everything down. Oh man, I just realized there was another article. There is an article I want you guys to, I want to make sure I have it now because if I forget about it. I had it marked. I had it up. I don't know what I did with it. But I want you guys to understand this because I want you guys to understand who is feeding you these things. And I'm sure you do. But every time there's an example of it, it needs to be brought up and it needs to be shown. It needs to be exposed. And again, my faith dictates that I do such a thing. Paul the Apostle says in Ephesians that we are to expose those things that are evil and bring them into the light. Hold on. I know a better way to do this because I know I sent the article to myself. And this is why, guys, the big video I want to work on, I don't want to live stream. Because I want to make sure I have maybe I didn't send the article to myself, man. I I want to have a good flow, and that's why I'm probably going to do an edited video. I want it to be to the point. I don't want this like me him hawing. I love live streaming. I like that there's interaction with the audience. I didn't start off this way, and I prefer to do it this way now. But if I have an idea and I want to expose something and I want it to get traction, needs to be polished, ideally. Needs to be very clean, very polished, something that people are going to go, "Oh, oh," Because unfortunately people tend to they tend to, not necessarily listen to things that are more real or raw. Now, I know there's a hunger for that. People want to hear it. But I'm saying when you're trying to get out a bigger message, they don't want to hear it where some guy is kind of rambling about, his thoughts. All right. This should get it. Boom. Found it. So just kind of to the point of what I was saying here, though, is that this secular humanism, which cropped up during the Enlightenment and guides all of our society today, in all of the narcissism today, all of the ideas of that article I showed you from Carl Menger, or no, it wasn't from Carl Menger, sorry, it was from Dr. Abercrombie or whatever, but about Carl Menger's book, right? It is, we're erasing the idea of ethics and morals. And actually, not fully, but we're replacing them with a new ethic and a new moral. In fact, that's exactly what the new left calls for. The new left, that is in reference to the commies who have been in America and American thought leaders. And that is oh, why can't I think of his name? Whatever. Go back to the video I made about groomers. I knew I might be off today, guys. I'm again quite tired, quite tired. And anyways, I hate it when something like that's on the tip of my tongue, though. They know this, and there needs to be an inversion. Paulo Freire is who I'm thinking of. Came out finally, but they need this inversion of morality. They need to tell you that you're the evil one. You're the evil one for not letting them diddle your kid. And need I remind you the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? All right. Let's get back to this. Their focus was on civilization and human customs. Their theater was the ethical and political problems of immediate concern for humans. It's funny. It's like history repeating itself or something. They did not hold for any universals, not universal truths nor universal values. And actually, the left doesn't hold for any. You think that they do, and you keep falling for this game of looking at them and being hypocritical. And you should call them out for being hypocritical, mind you. But it isn't just the fact that they are hypocritical. They're not, in that aspect, always hypocritical, because their real principle is the principle of power, just as the sophist believed. You can't be hypocritical. You're completely consistent if everything you say is about, well, solipsism. Solipsism, for those of you who don't know, is basically the belief that everything comes from you. So the world is perceived by you and through you and only holds value by you, and no one else really matters. And we call this as a pathology, narcissism. And in fact, we knew that this was a thing. The Greeks knew that this was a thing because they made a story about it. The man's so beautiful, he fell in love with himself. I mean, that story's deeper than that, but that's where these narratives come from, right? Protagoras of Abdera, of all things, this is a quote, of all things, the measure is man, of the things that they are, and of the things that are not, that they are not. That is each individual, not God or an unchanging moral law, is the ultimate source of value. Do what thou willst. I repeat that quite often because of the great famous Satanist who called himself the Beast, Aleister Crowley, said he wrote a book called I think it's Thelema in the Law or something like that. Anyways, I don't know. I've read it 15 years ago or something. I can't remember. Do what thou willst. The whole of the law is do what thou willst. Hedonism. And if you don't see the echoes from the past and the current present and believe that that somehow we're superior to the folks of ancient time, I don't know what to tell you. You're lost. And we have electricity and heat and fossil fuel. Okay. They're trying to steal all that away from you right now, by the way. Like 100%. Joe Biden just shut down the leasing of land in Alaska while gas is back up on a rise. What do you think that's going to do? You think he did that not purposefully? You think he did that for the environmental impact? The sophists were itinerant teachers who accepted fees in return for instruction in oratory and rhetoric. Okay, well, I mean, you deserve to be paid, right? And many claim that they could teach anything and its opposite, thesis and antisynthesis. Sound familiar? Gorgalis is a founder of the art, that is the craft of sophism. And he believed nothing exists, and if it does, we can't know it. But even if we could know it, we cannot communicate it. This is literally the problem of language and philosophy in the 20th century that spurred on postmodernism. They outright rejected it. Not just language, but epistemology. The why do we know things? How do we know things, right? Utterly nihilistic and post-structuralistic because it is just 2,000 years old. I probably meant to word that differently, but I was trying to do it on my phone, guys. So, and I was still sipping my coffee this morning. Coffee. Utterly nihilistic and post-structuralistic. That's what we're dealing with today. Oh, apparently I double posted that too. Despite efforts by Hegel and George, I think that's Grote. I'm not really sure about that name, but is it Grote? Is it Grote or Gautier? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, towards rehabilitating the reputations of Georges and other sophists in the 19th century, the sophists still had a foul reputation well into the 20th century, as evidenced by the pejorative term sophistry. So right there, we have the basis of the beginning of modern sophistry starts with Hegel in the thesis antithesis. And all Hegel did was say, well, yeah, I mean, in simple terms at least, yeah, both these are things. And what we'll do is we'll just keep presenting them until we get to some sort of middle ground that'll unfold. So when they're trying to social engineer you, when they're trying to program this synthetic society, understand that you're going to have a party win on one side of the aisle, and they're going to push a little hard. And then the other party's going to go, whoa, 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 hold up there, buddy. And all of a sudden, they're going to stop. And then that party's going to sit in power and do nothing. I mean, that sounds pretty familiar to me, but maybe they do a little bit. Or maybe society's like, okay, enough. We're sick of this. We've been inundated for a decade now of wokeness. Most people think this occurred in the last 2 to 4 years because they are utterly asleep. The wokeness did not just happen under Donald Trump all of a sudden. White supremacist everywhere. The ultra MAGA king. Ultra dark MAGA king, thank you. Like, seriously, this started back in 2012. In 2012, with BLM and Trayvon Martin and all that stuff, right? And before that, well, we can go back to, the French Revolution. In the United States, we didn't beat out these ideas. We embraced them under FDR. We became a command economy, a centralized economy. You have millionaire farmers today, industrial farms, and they're privately owned. And so the owners are millionaires, some of them probably billionaires. And they get subsidized by the government every year because of programs that FDR put in place in the 30s. Programs, by the way, that also propped up the price of goods by slaughtering animals while people were starving. And this corporate government merger has been a long, long problem. It's actually, in part, it's one of the few things I sort of agree with Noam Chomsky on. It's in part why the founders of America kind of approach things a bit differently. But it didn't take long for corporations to try to pilfer the coffers of the government. It didn't take very long at all. By the 1880s, you had railroads competing with each other, and they were all but one government subsidized. The one that made it, across the U.S., the first transcontinental railroad in the U.S., that was privately owned. It's amazing. It's amazing. But enough of my libertarian talking points. Time to move on. In 1930, French philosopher Jacques Martina, I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce a French name ever, so I'm just like, what? Maritain, I don't know, remarked, sophistry is not a system of ideas, but a vicious attitude of mind. The sophists came to consider as the most desirable form of knowledge the art of refuting and disproving by many skillful arguments. And that's all it is. This is what we call, modern debating. It's stupidness. And so there were rules that were kind of set up for debate over the course of time to decide if we were talking the truth or not. And part of those rules were the ideas of logical fallacies, right? Another part of that was, it's not really debating, but it gets you to a line of reasoning and thinking, is what we call platonics, or understanding the system of asking questions, question to get down to the root. It's actually highly influential in psychology and treating patients, because yeah, there are skills that psychologists have, and there are things, there are diagnostics, there are whatever, but a lot of it is depending on the method, technique, who you go to, is them just asking you, what do you think about this or that or whatever? They want to hear from you so that they can see how you are viewing the world and what's going on with you. And I think, like I say, I come on here because I'm trying to present material to you guys and my thoughts, but I come here, this is a loudspeaker for me. I say whatever. When I approach people normally in a regular conversation, unless I know them very well and I understand how I can speak with them without, making them triggered, offended, whatever, I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to delve into their beliefs. I'm going to try to get to the first principles of things with them, if they allow me. In recent years, however, modernists and post-structuralists have found great value in the philosophy of Georgius, especially his theories on truth and language. Yeah, because his theories on truth and language are what postmodernism are based on. It's based on sophistry, literally. I doubt you guys can hear it. I can hear my wife downstairs playing with the baby. It's pretty funny. They're like screaming at each other. Let's see here. Calesius, a character in Plato's Republic, is a modern post-structuralist leftist. His arguments: a critique of conventional justice, a positive account of justice according to nature, a theory of virtues, and a hedonistic concept of good. For the first aspect of the argument, he supports the ruling of strong individuals and criticizes the weak for trying to undermine them. Might makes right. Remember, folks, the pacifism of Christianity was exceptional in the ancient world. The ancient world believed if you were weaker, a weaker people, weaker tribe, weaker nation, however you want to frame it, you were inferior. If you weren't inferior, then why are you our slaves? That was the extent of their thought on it. It's pretty much simple. They were of better stock. They had a better society, which is why their society could conquer your society. I don't believe that that's true. That the idea that is being presented to us, though, by the modern sophists, and what they're saying is that because Western society in its Christian basis is better, which is why the entire world has pretty much adopted it, they're saying they are supremacists. For me saying that makes me a supremacist. Now, the problem we have, of course, is most of the things of Western society aren't really Christian things that they would say is supremacist. There's no teaching by Christ to go enslave people. There's no teaching by Christ to have wars. In fact, he says to not live by the sword. There's no teachings from Christ to go and conquer and colonialize. That was the power of men. And as the left calls them imperialists, they are no different because they wish to colonize all of the world with their commie gobbledygook. It's what they want to do. They are colonizers themselves. But again, it doesn't matter that they are, because they're the right ones. They have the power. They are self-centered. says he views democracy as the tyranny of the many over the exceptional individual. Actually, agree with that. I agree with it in both ways. It goes both ways. But I'm not a fan of democracy, so I like rule of law. I like republics. I like I'm a minarchist. I like very, 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 very small, very, very, very local government. We're gonna have a big overarching government and a federalist system, which is what we're supposed to have, not a big one, but one that connects everyone. Well, I want that to be really small too. Very minimalist too. And with very little purview into anything in your life. Says, and stress the citizens should allow themselves to be ruled by these strong individuals. This is the byline of the Democrats. You plebs must accept the master's edict. Today we call them elites, technocrats, or shareholders, a la World Economic Forum, Great Reset, Build Back Better, Hope and Change. Yes, we can. And if you see what is laid out, you understand lost fools are the target of sophists and cult leaders. And the next thing we're going to talk about is cult leaders, folks. You see, justice is to the advantage of the stronger, according to Theris Machios. The old Greek names, they're not easy to pronounce either. Or Latin names, man. What's up with these old names? Sophists, as a collective, tended to emphasize their benefit as more important than moral issues or as the chief moral issue, hence, oppression. As a sophist, Marx invigorated a new kind of sophist. Though revolutionary, lacking certain properties, they are oppressed because they don't get the privileges of having those properties via semantics, non sequiturs, and made up, non replicable studies. They embody retribution. Now, what do I mean via semantics? I mean, they change the meanings of words. Not like words change organically. This isn't organic. Again, synthetic. Everything they do, plastic and synthetic. Right? And I mean those words in all of their uses. That's why I'm using them specifically. It applies. It's multivariant, right? I'm not being semantical here. But they do. That's what they do. And then they are talking on a different level than you. And then unless you can accept their vocabulary, then you're an oppressor. Half of the stuff they do is they play these little word games where they take a word that sounds familiar to another word and they associate and tie it together, which a lot of people do. And they never study the etymology. Like I saw this whole thing the other day. There's a video of this guy talking about Gyrus, I think it was, and the earth, and how what was it? Was it that word? Was that I can't remember, but it wasn't gyro, right? Which would be the Greek word for rotation, right? It was something about how we're born or spun into this world, and the earth is spinning, and that's why this word means that. And I'm like, that's not the etymology of that word. And I looked it up and I'm like, yeah, this dude's just like talking out of his butt because words sound familiar. They sound similar, so therefore they're the same. No, that's not how that works. Non sequiturs, of course, are points that don't follow to other points, basically, in simple terms. They're not comparable. It's apples to oranges, right? And made up non-replicable studies. Well, what is that? That is the 80% replicability problem. I think it's actually higher than that. I think it's closer to 90% in social sciences, meaning they didn't conduct actual science. They wrote papers, pawned it off in our synthetic world and said, hey, here's a synthetic result that everyone's going to believe. Let's talk about it. And then even half the time that there is a study that might say something, it's not addressed correctly, which is why we love our friend Aiden Paladin, who does such a good job of breaking down these studies. So the whole thing the other year when it came out about, some people have no inner monologue, that's not what that study said at all. That study said some people at some point in any given moment have no inner monologue. That's all. And of course, they embody retribution because they must take vengeance for all of those who've been oppressed like them. So why don't you plebs just shut up and listen to your masters? They scream, but only when it's the master they prefer. Well, here is why, Sophist. Here's why we won't just listen to your experts, your technocrats, because they're not experts. I've been more right than the experts. I'm a layman. I'm a blue-collar worker. Now, granted, I'm pretty smart. I'm not the smartest guy. I think I have a good BS detector. I think that's probably a big part of it. And I am generally ahead of the curve on like certain things, fitness trends, whatever. I always have been. It's just something God has blessed me with. I was back into kettlebells all the way, and I think I bought my first kettlebell in 2002. But look, like, we're not buying it because it's nonsense. It's right here. It's right here in my faith. This is from sorry, escaped me for a second there. Again, 5 hours of sleep all week. Not the best sleep. Anyways, this is from Jude in the scriptures. These people are blemishes at your love feasts, eating with you without the slightest qualm, shepherds who feed only themselves. They are clouds without rain, meaning they're useless, blown along by the wind, autumn trees without fruit, and uprooted, twice dead. There's why, because my master warned me of you. And the Bible has descriptions like that over and over again, especially in the New Testament, yes, especially in the Old Testament and the Proverbs and the Psalms. See, here's the thing I'll get to in here is I already know how all this plays out. I know how all of this plays out. Now, maybe you aren't as confident as I am. Maybe you don't have my faith. That's fine. But I'll tell you this. It looks like we lose, but we win. So, well, maybe you don't. I do. We'll see. We'll see. Here we go. There are two ways, and only two ways. First, the way of life and the kingdom of God, and second is the way of death and the kingdom of the deceiver. No man can serve two masters. You are either a child of this world and its evil, or of God. And those who hate the truth serve the God of this world. Period. Those who would serve to manipulate and control. And they don't believe. They don't believe. James, the brother of Jesus, said, even demons believe and shake and tremble. Of course, he said that in the thing where Christians back then even were going, I have faith. And they would get, fine, show me your works. And James said, a man who says he has faith without works has no faith at all. There's always going to be work done. Always. The expression of your morals and ethics of your religion must be shown. And if not, then you're a sophist too. You're not living an authentic life. It means nothing. And I can tell you, God will not count you as righteous. Ask yourself, what life does the sophist bring to those who it touches? What goodness does it spread? What expression of sacrifice and selflessness does it hold? What illumination does it create outside of now I'm not going to be able to say it. Solipsism, hedonism, and extinction of joy. And let's leave with an excerpt from one of the most profound pieces of literature of the 20th century. So I'm not going to read this from the tweet. This is really annoying me, man. StreamYards, what did you do? Why am I not able to just go to a new tab? Why do I have to go through all this? I have to close it out, bring it back up. It's quite annoying. Quite annoying. You're messing up my flow. There it is. So, 1984, Part 3, Chapter 3. This book is one of the most profound pieces of literature of the 20th century. You have to accept that. Orwell was really on to something. He really understood this. He was one of these people. Now, he wasn't fully one of these people. In fact, he rejected the elitists, but understood within himself that he was one of them. Right? So, here we have the scene where Winston, the protagonist, is being interrogated, and he's basically being told of what the purpose of their society is and the party. And this is the where the power speech comes from that I quite happen to like, because it's the reality of all of this. It says there are 3 stages in your reintegration, said O'Brien. There is learning, there is understanding, and there is acceptance. Does this sound familiar, guys? Look into your CRT stuff about how these things work. It is time for you to enter upon the second stage. As always, Winston was lying flat on his back. I'll skip that. I skipped that in the tweet as well. As you lie there, said O'Brien, you have often wondered. You have even asked me why the Ministry of Love should expend so much time and trouble on you. And when you were free, you were puzzled by what was essentially the same question. You could grasp the mechanics of the society you lived in, but not its underlying motives. And this is important because this is why I do this kind of stuff and why I'm working on this video. You know, that not this one I'm doing at this time, but as I mentioned before, I'm working on a video because a lot of people talk about this stuff and they talk around it, but they don't get to the heart of it. And we really need to get to the heart of it. If you want to dissect it, if you want to destroy it, if you want to defeat it, people need to understand it. And you need to understand how and where it came from, why it creeped up, and where the slippery slope next leads. Do you remember writing in your diary? I understand how. I do not understand why. It was when you thought about why that you doubted your own sanity. You have read the book, Goldstein's book, or parts of it, at least. Did it tell you anything that you didn't already know? You have read it, said Winston. I wrote it. That is to say, I collaborated in writing it. No book is produced individually, as you know. Is it true what it says? A description, yes. A program it sets forth is nonsense. The secret accumulation of knowledge, a gradual spread of enlightenment, ultimately a proletariat rebellion, the overthrow of the party. You foresaw yourself that that was what it would say. It is all nonsense. The proletariats will never revolt. Hey, Orwell understood this as much as Lenin did. Not in 1,000 years or a million. They cannot. They will. They revolt like we've seen historically when there are food shortages and famine. We're going to be talking about some of that here in a bit. I guess I've been going on 2 hours now already, so I guess we're going to have a 3-hour stream today. I do not have to tell you the reason. You know it already. You have excuse me. If you have ever cherished any dreams of violent insurrection, you must abandon them. There is no way in which the party can be overthrown. The rule of the party is forever. Make that the starting point of your thoughts. Now, there's something about this. There's something to this that's deeper. I say it all the time. Leftism is the default. Now, the leftists believe that as well, but not in the same way. They think that the world was corrupted away from, leftism, or that we're maybe not even that even. They do from the Rousseauian perspective, but as far as the more technocratic, technological, advanced, developed society, they think that we've deviated from getting there by implementing all of the capitalistic, patriarchal, cis heteronormative structures of oppression, which is absurd. The Rousseauian perspective is absurd too. There is no noble savage. Savages are savages. Now, did they live better lives in a lot of ways? Sure. But that goes back to being ignorant, and blissful ignorance is blissful ignorance. And modern society has a lot of drawbacks. I mean, Uncle Ted was right about a lot of things. Not right about blowing up people, but he was definitely right about over-socialization. He was definitely right about technology making us weak and infirmed. So, yeah, there's that. But I think what's most important to understand is that because human beings are tribal by nature, and we all grow up in families, the left perspective of a socialist utopia works out pretty well in a house, in a family, with people that love each other, right? It's the scaling that becomes the problem. And honestly, it doesn't always work that well, because really in your household, it's not the utopia they want it to be either. Like, I'm a dad. I have children. I can get them things. I take care of them. I feed them. I do whatever. But you know what? If dad wants to buy something, he buys it because it's my money. And that's the way the government works. That's the way your socialist utopia works. And that's why you always get an elitist class. That elitist class would be the philosopher kings, according to Plato. And according to Marx, it'd be the proletariat. But no, it's your Stalins and your Maos and your Xi Jinpings and Kim Jong-U's and Il's and whatever his sister's name is. I don't remember off the top of my head. Because, folks, that is the default. That is the default, that people who are psychopathic and have the will to power and are willing to hurt you and do anything that they can to gain power and to see that their will is implemented, they always climb the ranks. And it is in the origins, the beginnings of the civilization of man, at least from the biblical perspective. And I'm pretty sure from all perspectives. And so people get a king, basically the king, Nimrod in the Bible, first king, basically via tradition, was a mighty hunter before the Lord, against the Lord. And hunting has a predatory nature about it. If you look at the Old Testament scriptures, it is those that are tenders to the flock that are honored by God. Because animal husbandry requires care and love and time. Hunting is only destructive. Now, I'm not against hunting. I don't think God's against hunting, period. It's an analogy, right? It's a metaphor for something deeper. And that deepness is about how you go about life. Do you care for things, or are you predatory? Or like Cain. Cain was predatory toward his brother, but before that, he was a farmer. And God didn't like that either. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there are green thumbs out there that are obsessed with their plants and talk to them and love them like they're animals. Right? That exists. But for the most part, you water it, you give it the nutrients, and you let it be. And you might, you dig it up eventually. There's not a lot of effort in gardening. There's not a lot of care. But the shepherd's responsible for a lot of folks, a lot of animals, a lot of sheep, and there are a lot of wolves out there that wish to prey upon them. That's the thing that makes the shepherd noble, right? And beyond that, or back to the point I was making about the original kings, these were men that were powerful, that were brutes. It's the same thing that happened in England when the United Kingdom became a thing, right? As it became a political power after the Romans left. That's exactly what happened. That's where all your lords and knights are from. That's why chivalry was started by the church, mind you, in the first place, so that men and women could properly and appropriately interact without men just grabbing them up and going and raping them or whatever they were doing back in those days. Like, all this Arthurian lore is Arthurian lore. There is some basis of truth in it, but it is meant to be put out there as an exemplar toward the people so that they know how to act. And again, modern society, as we read earlier, is trying to tear away the idea of chivalry and paint it as evil. But chivalry was never about oppressing women. It was about protecting them from brute men. Because they always come to power. The kings of this world are not in God's favor. There may be one or two here and there, but that's not how it works. And if you think otherwise, and you are a believing Christian who believes that the scriptures, what we call the Bible, is God's word, you're not reading it properly. Because from the very beginning, God is saying, no, this is wicked and so is civilization. Again, I point to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. He came closer to the bed for every, he repeated, and now let us get back to the question of how and why. You understand well enough how the party maintains itself in power. Now tell me why we cling to power. What is our motive? Why should we want power? Go on, speak, he added as Winston remained silent. Nevertheless, Winston did not speak for another moment or two. A feeling of weariness had overwhelmed him. The faint, mad gleam of enthusiasm had come back into O'Brien's face. Why did Orwell pen that? Because O'Brien is seeing the exercise of power and authority over Winston. See, Orwell understood something about the human soul. It's always about power, folks. It's always about power. All of the hedonistic evil things is about power. The like speaking to like the most common one that people just are nonchalant about is sexuality, right? It's just accepted in our society that people are promiscuous. And that's okay. Now, if you talk to most people that they do think that, so many partners is excessive, and it's usually a very low number. Um, but the reality is I've watched the trends over the years. The numbers have gone up. It will continue to go up. And part of being promiscuous is a sense of power, sexual power. Now, for a woman, it's degrading and they don't know it. They feel powerful, but it's because women always have sexual power. It is inherent into their being. Men, on the other hand, have to work at sexual power. And so if you want to be powerful sexually, you have to learn to get good with women. You have to talk to them. You have to know how to please them. You have to do all these other things, right? And it is empowering. You feel incredible when you can walk up to a beautiful woman that scares and terrifies men to death. They won't even talk to her. And you go, hey, you come with me, come sit down. And you have her for the rest of the night. And I'm not saying you get to go home with her. I'm just saying you have her attention. That's a powerful feeling. When their friends come up to you, I'm kind of, talking about a specific situation I remember. And someone they know, a friend or acquaintance, comes up to you and go, "Oh man, you can't get that girl. She's got a boyfriend, blah, 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 blah." And it's like, dude, I'm doing pretty good. She's reacted pretty well to me. When you're doing things that are very sexually suggestive and they're going along with it. Like I said, I was a horrible person, Make no qualms about that. It is what it is. Cannot change the man that I once was. I can only be the man I am now. But that gives you, a sense of purpose and meaning. And so does wealth building. So does a lot of, the manipulating people. This is what people who are psychopathic and they're liars and manipulators, they get a sense of excitement from that. Power is intoxicating. He knew in advance that what O'Brien would say. Excuse me, guys. My throat got a little froggy there. That the party did not seek power for its own ends, but only for the good of the majority. That it sought power because men in the mass were frail cowards, creatures who could not endure liberty or face the truth, and must be ruled over by the systematically deceived by others who were stronger than themselves. Does this sound familiar to you guys? And I don't mean because you read 1984 before. That it sought power because men in the masses were frail, cowardly creatures who could not endure liberty in the face of truth. Maybe not even that being a direct familiar echoing of something, in the culture today, but just people being afraid to stand up, period, to anything, to put themselves out there, to do anything. I'm going to lose my job. I have children, and isn't it? Sorry, I'm a harsh critic of that, guys. Very harsh critic of that. And I've had guys message me, oh, you don't want your name posted on here. Dude, you don't do anything publicly. And I don't have that big of a problem with my name being out there. I'm trying to protect other people. But I'm also not trying to be famous. I don't care for that. I just want to say my piece, and I hope that it lands where it lands. Freaking people get on and they go, oh, I have to have a fake name and this and that and every other account, da da da. It's like, dude, you think you're more important than you are. I promise. And yes, I know they can come after you. Well, okay. You got to pay the piper, man. Got to pay the price. Or you're just allowing yourself to be enslaved. That it sought power because men in masses were frail, cowardly creatures who could not endure liberty or face the truth and must be ruled over and systematically deceived by others who were stronger than themselves. That is what I was telling you about earlier in that Twitter thread, that they believe that you must just listen to the masters because they're doing it for your best interest. Just like Dr. Anthony Fauci. Well, I lied in the pandemic. Sorry, it's not the best Fauci of mine. Give me a second here. Well, you see, I lied about the mask because we needed to make sure that there was enough PPE for the first responders and the nurses and the doctors. No. I mean, I'm sure that is part of it. I even told my wife in the beginning that was probably part of it. But real PPE, which I have years of experience with, is not that crap that they were telling you across the news. There's an instance of this in recent history. That the choice for mankind lay between freedom and happiness. Can't have both. This is what Winston thinks, though, right? And that for the great bulk of mankind, happiness was better. That the party was the eternal guardian of the weak, a dedicated sect doing evil that good might come, sacrificing its own happiness to that of others. The terrible thing, thought Wilson, the terrible thing was that when O'Brien said this, he would believe it. You could see it in his face. O'Brien knew everything 1,000 times better than Winston. He knew what the world was really like, in what degradation the mass of human beings lived, and by what lies and barbarities the party kept them there. He had understood it all, weighed it all, and it made no difference. All was justified by the ultimate purpose, being on the right side of history. What can you do, thought Winston, against a lunatic who is more intelligent than yourself, who gives your arguments a fair hearing, and then simply persist in his lunacy? Well, that's the left right there in a nutshell. You are ruling over us for our own good, he said feebly. You believe that human beings are not fit to govern themselves, and therefore... He started and almost cried out. A pang of pain had shot through his body. O'Brien had pushed the lever of the dial up to 35. Now, he's being re-educated right now, folks. So, if I didn't set that up well in the beginning here. That was stupid, Winston. Winston, stupid, he said. You should know better than to say a thing like that. He pulled the lever back and continued. This is O'Brien talking now. Now, I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this: the party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power, not wealth or luxury or long life or happiness. Only power, pure power. What power means, you will understand presently. We are different from all the oligarchs of the past, and what we know, what we are doing. All the others, even those who resemble ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The German Nazis, the Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. They pretended, perhaps they even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just round the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. Oh no, Stalin knew. Mao knew. I guarantee you, well, we'll get there. We'll get there because we're about to go there in a moment. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish a dictatorship. Just like Julius Caesar. You guys know anything about that? Know anything about the civil wars Julius Caesar started, riots, all that kind of stuff, so he could rise to power? The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now, do you begin to understand me? Yeah. That's it. See, let me check on some chat before I move on here. Nobody on Entropy today. That's odd, but I haven't streamed in a while, so I understand. The Hardy. Don't diss clouds without rains. Yeah. I thought chivalry truly flourished after the Third Crusade, after the Europeans met Saladin and started making fanfics out of him. I don't know, man. What I do know is that the church basically kind of became an arbiter between the men and the women, because the idea of the Arthurian court and chivalry, like, it wasn't just in the UK. Obviously, there was the French and the Germans and whatever else, but they spun up this kind of idea of how you should interact with the lady folks, because the men literally were just savages. Like, dude, the Vet TV is a good example of this. Like, the guy, the CEO of Vet TV is absolutely truthful about what military guys are, and they're all a bunch of scumbags. And that's not to say that there's not an honor and all this other stuff. But guys, you're talking about blue collar, salt of the earth dudes, and it's a lot of egos. It's a lot of egos. They're all a bunch of scumbags. They care about blowing stuff up. They care about eating good food, getting drunk, and sleeping with girls. And I'm not saying that there aren't good men or ethical men, or that they're all, horrible people. But I'm saying they're all a bunch of scumbags. They're regular people. They're not some sort of person on some moral plane way above. In fact, when I was in the military, I had to definitely relax after a while, because I was a lot more serious than other people. I was just generally when I was younger. I think it took me a lot of going through a lot of trauma, personal, emotional trauma, relationship stuff, to take myself a lot less seriously. So, Modern Man references evolution of today's psychology concerning the id factor under normal circumstances. In other words, right out killing someone for no reason, or ripping someone because you can reverse logic, moral reasoning. You're throwing stuff out there while I'm reading, I guess, Tahari. Appreciate you being here, man. Spook, you're out. All right, man. Take it easy. Catch the rest of the stream later. I deal with people every day in the office environment and on the phone involving an over exaggeration of their importance. Dude, I'll tell you about work the other day, but again, not trying to overly dox myself, but yeah, we had a dude that just, he didn't understand that there were a lot of people in front of the line before him. So I'll put it that way. And also that, when you order at like peak hours and you want deliveries, and it's a Friday night, it might not be one of those things that's going to be so quick, Anyways, let me get to the next article. Not what I wanted to do. Edit name? It's my name. Why? Oh, because I'm sharing it. Why can't I share another tab? StreamYards. Why did you change that? Every time today. This is just... I could just do a straight screen share, I guess. But it doesn't look as nice. Does not look as nice. So, where are we at? Believe! So this is from Substack. This is from Chris Bray. And I caught this on, quite frankly, and Frank went over this, so I don't need to rehash everything Frank said, but this is more of a bigger picture and a bigger narrative. And we've talked about Jim Jones lately, so he's going to talk about Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Now, Jim Jones is known as a Christian, but he was not a Christian, folks. He was a moral degenerate who wanted power, and this outlies that. And you're going to see what stupid people seeking for truth will do. Seeking, let's say, not for truth, sorry, a leader, a God king. And Jim Jones was a God king because he claimed to be Christ, reincarnated. So, from Chris Bray, in 1971, Jim Jones loaded up some buses in California and took members of his People's Temple across the country to Pennsylvania, to Woodmont, the estate of the late spiritual leader Father Divine, who had a much bigger church and a lot more money than Jones did. Reaching Woodmont, Jones tried Plan A, announcing the glorious news that he was the reincarnation of Father Divine and had come to lead his church again. And we might as well just go ahead and put my name on the bank accounts. The dead leader's wife suggested, in fairly clear language, that Jones get back on his bus while he could still walk. The delegation from the People's Temple took the hint, but Jones also executed Plan B with modest success. He poached some congregates and drove them across the country to his own church and Yucca, I guess. I don't know. Back home, Jones worries that people who had followed Father Divine would struggle to make the transition, feeling more loyalty to their old leader than to their new one. So he showed them that he couldn't be crossed. One day, as the refugees from Philadelphia sat eating a meal with everyone else in the communal dining room, Jones walked in and caught several of the early members of his church being disloyal to him. And so, pointing a finger, he ordered them to die. They did, immediately. Bodies littered the floor. Jones let the silence linger, standing over the lifeless bodies of the people who had betrayed his trust, the power of death shooting through his fingertips. And then he showed his merciful side and resurrected them. A choice that allowed the dead to share the horrible feeling of being struck down by the indescribably vast words, right? Indescribably vast and awesome power of Jim Jones, terrifying the new members of the church, fell into line. Of course, that was set up. He faked, the whole thing. Dart. He did this all the time during recruiting trips recruiting trips. I thought it said recurring recruiting. Yeah. Trips to rented churches in other cities. Visitors had mid-sermon strokes and heart attacks. Nurses in the congregation frantically tried to resuscitate them, but announced that it was too late. But no, the Reverend Jones would allow death to strike in his own holy church, or wouldn't allow it. Rushing forward and shoving the nurses aside, he commanded the dead to arise, yada, yada, whatever. In 1972, a church bulletin proudly announced that Jones had personally resurrected 40 dead people so far in just 1 year. And here you are feeling proud that you remembered to make the bed this morning. I take these stories from Raven, doorstop thick history of Jones and People's Temple, written by journalist Tim Ritterman, with research assistance from a colleague, John Jacobson. Ritterman decided to write about Jones after he was shot at Jonestown, visiting the final People's Temple location with the congressional delegation led by Leo Ryan. The research task was made easier by the self-regard of the Reverend Jones had felt, because he left behind a giant catalog of taping, sermons, and lectures, and a long paper trail of church bulletins and memorandums. And oh boy, are they juicy, folks. They are creepy, weird, explicit. We're gonna get to the fray here, and you're going to see just how far ideologies and people willing to give themselves over to a human being as a god and where they will go. And mind you, this is exactly what Marxism is about. Jones being a Marxist, by the way. The resulting book is an extraordinary detailed look at every step Jones took along the path to mass murder, starting with the sadistic Hudsuckerism of his strange childhood. We wonder now how people believe all this stuff about our moment. Anthony Fauci says not to wear a mask, it won't protect you. And so people don't wear a mask because Dr. Fauci says so. And then Dr. Fauci says to always wear a mask. And so the same people always wear a mask because Dr. Fauci said so. And you think they don't notice? Yeah. You think Dr. Fauci doesn't notice the Dr. Fauci memorabilia all over the place? Frankly, if you are questioning the science, sir, you are questioning me because I am the science. Actually, I said that wrong. He said, if you're questioning me, you're questioning the science. That is a God complex, folks. Joe Biden signs an executive order requiring masks on federal property for 100 days. And he says, if you wear a mask for 100 days, we'll end the pandemic and you'll never have to wear a mask again. And then about 465 days later, we're still on the same pandemic and you should keep wearing a mask with 1 million dead. Although those numbers are not. Those aren't COOF alone numbers. We'll put it that way. The vaccines are 95% effective against infection. Okay, well, they're 60% effective against illness. Okay, well, latest findings from the Pfizer studies, I believe, was 12%, at least from what I've seen. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Don't yeet me, YouTube. You were the ones pushing fake news. I've been consistent throughout this. There was a point where I realized that they were more dangerous than I had suspected, but yeah. And still people are on the bus. How? The first part of the answer is that people routinely believe way dumber things to the point of dying for them. And the dark art of making them believe is not a mysterious act. It's not at all. There are people that do this for a living. And again, if you start going down the road of doing this, you will consider it normal. It's how we work. That's why these folks that do these things for the revolution, for the right side of history, it's normalized to them. Jones started his ministry as a Christian church, steering clear of mainstream congregations and hunting for believers who spoke in tongues and followed ministers who healed the sick from laying on of hands. So Jones perceived that the Pentecostals, most likely, the church I grew up in when I was really young, before my father left, I was about 8 or so, he left. He perceived that the Pentecostals or certain Baptist groups that do this kind of stuff were manipulable. And I would perceive that to be true, because one of the reasons why my father left is because the stuff that the head pastor was preaching on the pulpit, which wasn't scriptural, biblical, and all about making him rich. He wanted people who were capable of fierce and extreme belief, detailed, unimportant, and he built a church around them. Within a few years, he began to reveal to them that he had been wrong, but no worries because he'd thought deeply about the problem and he was figuring it out. It turns out that he helpfully explained that the Bible is nonsense and there actually isn't really a God. Then, reaching a little deeper, he helped them to finally break through to the understanding that he was God. And the only spirituality that mattered was apostolic socialism, the spirituality of deep and selfless human kindness. So you should be spiritual and sign over all of your property to me. He started with a hardcore Christians, and within a few years, he had them shouting with joy as he performed his go-to move of hurling down the Bible and grinding it under his foot in contempt while he screamed, quite actually, I am God. Yeah. Blasphemy. So, yes, you can get people to overlook inconsistencies in your messaging about wearing cloth masks. I mean, gasp. Jim Jones had great charisma and shrewdness and all the crap we usually think about cult leaders. But the truth is that he was a hokey clown show of a human being, a sideshow freak, and Elvis Sideburns who made carnival barkers look dignified. He hid chicken livers up his sleeve so he could rip cancer out of the bodies of the sick. He kept an elite staff of inner circle dirty tricksters who stole from trash cans and mailboxes so he could use divine ESP to shock people with the secrets he knew from seeing into their very soul. He was pure crap and misplaced pimp in a fake pulpit. He was a man, as you will see, who has no moral boundaries. He literally had no moral boundaries, folks, except for allowing anyone else to be in control but him. Yeah, it is crazy, Dahari, that he could convince people to give up their possessions, but you know, it gets worse. It gets way, way worse. People saw this routinely, excuse me, routinely, consistently, remarkably. People watched Jim Jones resurrect the dead and pull cancer from the bodies of the sick, and they laughed and rolled their eyes and walked out of his idiotic church. Ministers invited him to give guest lectures, then threw him out of their church. Many people invited to the attend service at the People's Temple went one time, once. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to clear my throat and the mic a bunch, but yeah, got a little clearing to do so I can speak. Eventually, Jones trained excuse me. Eventually, Jones trained a cadre of front door staff to screen visitors, sidling up to people they haven't seen before and initiating conversations. People who were too alert, too shrewd, too conventional, too conservative, too radical, too likely to see through the BS were turned away on the front steps. Sorry, private service today. I'll leave your phone number and we'll call you if we have a public event sometimes. He didn't even want them in the room. He wanted the people who were equipped to believe, and he knew the markers well enough to train his staff at seeing them. And of course, this is all the people he killed eventually. That might have got it. I don't know. Once he got rid of these people who saw that he was a scumbag and a clown, he was left with a room full of people who didn't see. And he went from there with a toolkit of very plain and direct tools. Nudge groups and SPIB were blazing trail. Behavioral science has been picking pockets since the dawn of time, though we've called it other things. Yes. What's remarkable about Jim Jones is in 2020, is how familiar he is and how much his unremarkable technique of social manipulation and personal control match our own moment. Of course, there is a part 2, which is quite disturbing. But I have to I have to X out and then re-pull another thing up before I can show you the stinking video or stinking article. I mean, I do have another video. I don't remember what it is now. So part 2, Jim Jones was normal. He broke families, he taught fear, he isolated people, he shamed and deemed people to break their spirits. He made people dependent and ran obedience tests with deliberate sadism to see who could take it. That is, those are the tools. Again, all of this comes from Tim Ritterman's book, Raven, which I encourage you to read. Now, before I go on, there is a documentary series about Nexium, which is a cult that was started. It was a self-guru empowerment thing, and this cult was started, and this guy ended up molesting and branding women. You may remember it. One of I think the girl that plays Lois Lane in the TV show Smallville was a part of it. My wife, when she was still growing up and living in Albany as a young adult, was offered to become a part of it. And in the documentary, we saw the lady that tried to get her in. Oh man, it's going to drive me nuts. I hope you guys are, you're okay with me clearing my throat every 2 seconds. When Jonestown shows up in the news stories, People's Temple is usually described as a 1970s Bay Area cult that moved to Guyana. But that's not where Jim Jones started the church. In the beginning, in Indianapolis in the 1950s, in a moment when there were mostly black churches and white churches, Jones insisted on building a racially integrated congregation. This is part of the communist message. I've talked about this before. Probably one of the best videos I did early on when I started was my video on BLM's ties to Marxism and how they are overt Marxists and what Marxist goals are. And I brought up Manning Johnson's Race, Color, and Communism. So you can go find that if you want. But it was one of my bigger videos in the beginning. I actually had like a lot of views on that. Let's see here. That was before I was getting suppressed all the time too, though, In the moment, there were mostly black congregations. Then he warned them with increasing urgency that the church would be attacked by white supremacists who were outraged by their social progress. A flood of menacing phone calls and threatening letters backed up the point. One night, as members of the church visited Jones at home, he stepped into his bedroom alone as a brick crashed through the window. The visitors rushed into the bedroom where Jones told them that the white supremacists had just attacked his house. Miraculously, the brick and the broken glass had landed outside the window. That's interesting. It was outside, not inside. Wow. Amazing. Hey, what's the greatest threat to the United States right now? Isn't that white supreme pizzas? That's what I thought. Yeah, Waco, David Koresh, they're all sex cult leaders. That's how Mormonism started. I'm generally nice to Mormons, but you all are in a cult. You don't know it. It's still a cult. Christianity was believed to be a cult in the beginning, and it was against, those kind of practices. Now, the Gnostics, they loved them. But I would say that Mormonism is Gnostic. It's wholly Gnostic. It's based off Freemasonry. That's what that big G in Freemasonry means. It doesn't mean God, it means gnosis. Over the years, the threats of built to a crescendo. Look, although terrifying letter, and Jones warned his congregation that white supremacist threat was moving towards its culmination. At the time, he began to receive visions about the other great threat hanging over the world. Nuclear war is coming, he told them over and over again, sometimes even naming likely dates for the attack. Hey, aren't we talking about nuclear war right now? Isn't that why we have to stop Russia? Yeah. Finally, under the increasingly terrifying dual threat of death and local attack or death from Soviet missiles, either of which could happen at any moment, Jones sent an advance party across the country to find a place where his people could survive. And then, with a secure haven located, he led his congregation to the safety in a remote area of Northern California. Good thing they made it out, right? For a congregation of Midwesterners, their journey to California meant a departure from parents, siblings, and adult children. And back then, California was still like the Wild West, guys. It was very sparse and very red. For many, it meant a departure from their birthplace and every social connection they had ever made outside the church. Yes, and that was exactly the same thing for every person that has ever explored or traveled anywhere throughout history and all the settlers that came to America. So don't belabor this point, dude. Yes, people have to leave their families. In fact, men should leave their families and go explore the world. But I digress. It put them in the woods a couple thousand miles from their families in isolation together in a new place. Now, the isolation can be an issue under a cult leader, but that's why you should never give any singular individual the esteem that God deserves, right? Then, with church members living in church-built homes on a church-owned property, Jones helped them to see that selfishness was cruel and atavistic. People who loved were spiritually shared together. So what kind of self-involved monster kept a husband or a wife trapped in a limited one-on-one relationship? Liberating the members of his church, he helped them to start having sex with other church members outside of their marriages. In some instances, particularly close couples with especially stable relationships, like the church attorney, Tim Stollen, and his wife, Grace, forced Jones to issue direct orders telling them who else they would be having sex with. And yes, it did liberate them from confinement of their close marriage quickly and decisively, of course. That's why you don't spread your love around, folks. Now's not the time, honey. Okay, well, give me 20 minutes. Take her for a car ride. That's what I do. You guys, the other reason why I can't stream like all the time, like, because I could stream on off hours late at night if I didn't have a computer set up in my bedroom where everybody else needs to sleep and such. So anyways, I will have to finish up soon, but I am almost finished. So as Leighton rushed to help Jones, hold on, back here. Jones also helped by having sex with everybody, teaching them how to become free. One night, Jones had a heart attack. Another maneuver he used all the time. I'm coming for you, Wheezy. Apparently, that wasn't just Red Fox. So, another maneuver he used all the time. In the presence of the church member named Larry Leighton. As Leighton rushed to help, Jones explained that he needed to F his wife and had already started and had brought her to orgasm no fewer than 16 or 17 times during their first encounter. But no worries, because Jones also assigned another church member, Karen Toe, to have sex with Leighton to assuage his pain. After the divorce, Leighton and Toe got married, but Toe let Leighton know that she still preferred to have sex with Jones. See how liberating this is? Yeah. Cucked them all right? Bad, bad. It's horrible. These people are dead. From what I understand, they're all dead. And they're all dead for being fools. Just like all the commies that follow, all the communists, CRT, synthetic society that follow Misha Brzezinski, telling them that it is their job to tell them what to think. They're all fools and they're all going to die, and they're all going to die horribly. And you're never going to know the light of God. I can tell you that. You've had the opportunity. Someone might say, well, Bill, when were they preached to? What do you mean? We have 2,000 years of history of the church. It's been around, guys. You rejected it. The message has been around. It has been rejected. And the great deception or the great falling away has happened. It was the Enlightenment. And within the Enlightenment, we had a false prophet named Karl Marx. Karl Marx gave a prediction of how the world would go and how it would be. Didn't work out. So they have to direct it that way. He is the false prophet that would give power unto the beast, that is the nations, and the harlot, that is the church, the false church. Guess what the church is doing? It's indoctrinating everybody with those same communistic beliefs. But, I'm just a conspiracy theorist, whatever. When I was saying that Jones helped by having sex with everybody, I mean Jones helped by having sex with everybody. Many men in the People's Temple mistakenly thought they were heterosexuals who were attracted to their wives. Jones helped them to see themselves more clearly by, I am not making this up. You can read there, banging them in the bunghole. He hated to do it, and he didn't enjoy it. But he had a duty as their spiritual leader to help them to understand their true inner being. He raped these men because of power. Jones was, as I said, indulging in every excess of power. You guys probably don't know that he was high all the time too, on like cocaine and stuff. He had a really bad drug habit. Really bad. Dahari says I'm referring to the Second Enlightenment. Yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to call it that, I don't know anyone that refers to it as that. In fact, James Lindsay has been talking about a Second Enlightenment, and that Second Enlightenment is the freedom of information, that there won't be any gatekeepers. Because the First Enlightenment was about a freedom from the aristocracy. Anyways, Jones hated buggering those men, but he had to do it to teach them. Remember that Ritterman was able to reconstruct the history of the church by working in the extensive People's Temple archives. One of the kinds of documents that he found there was on file the letters of the man who wrote to thank Jones for helping him learn about themselves. And this is crazy, guys. This is absolutely crazy. It's mind-blowing. Jones helped others too, humbling and compromising them in a number of ways. Later, their confessions reinforced Jones's images as a selfless heterosexual superlover. One particular man committed his feelings to paper as part of his post-sex therapy. I felt that when you related to me, you were doing so to serve me without being condescending at all. Your choice of words, your warmth and tenderness made me feel that you deeply loved me. You effing me in the ass was, as I see it now, necessary to get me to deal with my deep-seated repression against my homosexuality. I have at times felt resentment at being effed, even though I knew your every motives were utterly pure. Listen to this. This guy is so indoctrinated. This is what the left wants to do to your children, folks. This isn't a person. This is a shell. A shell of a man. No self-respect. I mean, I could take this a whole nother way about leadership and man and males and what you're supposed to do. Just like now. I mean, I really don't have time to mute my mic. I told my wife, nope, now's not time. Now is not the time. And I'll spend the rest of the evening taking care of the baby. But now is my time to do this with you all. And there it was. The end. You have to set up your boundaries. You have to hold them and you have to stick to them. I can tell you the number one lesson that I figured out that of why I was being plagued by awful women all the time was boundary setting. Because of my love for them, I made myself weak and my boundaries moved. And every time I moved my boundaries, they lost more respect for me. And so they treat you worse and worse and worse. And then something else happens, right? Or you blow up and get angry because of the way they're acting. Or you're depressed because of the way they're acting. Whatever it is. Boundaries, folks, are everything. And the left does not believe in boundaries. They believe in the destruction of boundaries. You're effing me in the ass was I see it now necessary to get me to deal with my deep-seated repression against my homosexuality. I have at times felt resentment at being effed, even though I knew your motives were utterly pure. It was also due to, in part, to the humiliation of being discovered by my wife and Karen, meaning the two ladies he was sleeping with. And he was ashamed that, he's actually a homosexual, which I don't think he was, but Jones convinced them that he was. I did find being effed in the ass pleasurable, but I felt I felt so unnatural about it that the fear outweighed it. So is this a post hoc rationalization? I don't know. I know beyond doubt you are the very best sexual partner in the world, and I don't think I've ever thought I could really compete with you. That is crazy. Remember this the next time you feel baffled by some idiot still wearing a mask to drive around alone in his car. How can people be so gullible? Finally, destroying extended family connections and wrecking marriage, Jones turned to the destruction of the last family relationship. That is the husband and wife, right? Like there's the children, there's the husband and wife, and then there's the children. The church attorney, Tim Stolten, and his wife, Grace, had a son. Jones forced them to sign a false acknowledgement that their pastor was the boy's real father, and he kept the statement in church files to be used as a weapon. Then, when the child was 2 years old, Jones forced the Stallings to surrender their son to be raised by the collective outside their home. Children belong to the community, not the parents. Sound familiar, folks? You've probably seen that clip before. How do you get 900 people to drink poison? And if, well, a lot of guys had guns at that point when they were really forcing it along. And they're forced their children to drink it first. That's pretty much it, or at least the big piece of it. Fear, isolation, social atomization, the loss of family connection, sexual degradation, the lost identity. What have I been saying? What have I been saying? What is everything I talk about for 2 years almost now? My earlier videos were a little bit different because I had to get in the flow of things, figure this out, whatever. I had to get good at it. I had to get comfortable, right? But what have I been saying? Not that you guys don't know, but there's a difference between feeling it on your gut, and being able to articulate it and point to examples. You'll be shocked to hear the People's Temple also had all-night struggle sessions in which sleep-deprived people were forced to confess their most shameful secrets and to confront other people with dark truths about how they were really perceived. But that was just the baffling, the buffing and polishing. The major piece of craftsmanship was the disconnection. He destroyed people by liberating them from the bourgeois sexual norms and their backward Leave It to Beaver family fetishization BS. Congratulations, you're free. Yeah, you're free to be enslaved by Satan. Folks, mark my words. Well, they're not even my words. They are Paul the Apostle's words. And I quote, you are either a slave to God or you are a slave to sin and death. People visiting their pastor's bedroom to be given the gift of sexual liberation. Notice the book on his bedside bookshelf. He read the books about Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. He read them as self-help books, as how-to guides. The transitional phase of the People's Temple from weird church to full ruin cult paralleled the Cultural Revolution in which the Red Guards tore down the four olds and attacked their elders in public struggle sessions. If you read Tim Riederman's book, Raven, read it along Yuri Skelton's book, The House of Government, a long group of biography of the old Bolsheviks who rose to power alongside Stalin and then died in his purge. And go read We from Yevgeny Zamantian. It's the fictional utopia which they were trying to achieve, but he was one of the old Bolsheviks in exile because he started to, of course, make comments. So since StreamYards wants to be a pain, I am I'm just going to run a screen share because it'll be quicker because I am trying to be done here. So I have this pen. I've had this pen for a long time. It's easier to build strong children than repair broken men. Frederick Douglass. You wonder what he's talking about, Frederick Douglass there? Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Of course, we all know that from Martin Luther King. How about Bertrand Russell? Diet, injections, and injunction will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that will become psychologically impossible. Even if all are miserable, all will believe themselves happy because the government will tell them that they are happy. You said Saddam Hussein? Nice. Hitler was a leftist. You guys anyone can argue blue in the face about it. The philosophies all come from the same places. Their lineages come from the same places. The implementation of the command economy is the same. Aside from, businesses were still technically private, but they weren't. They were owned by the party and the government. So what all did I have else here? Well, we talk about the degeneration, what we get from our society all the time. I found this one interesting. Millennial men want 1950s housewives after they have kids, and this is just a complaint session, a struggle session about how the studies suggest that men would like housewives. Yeah. The other day, The View was like, how are women supposed to breastfeed? Talking about the milk shortage, the formula shortage. How are women supposed to breastfeed? That's what my other video is. Now I remember. I'm not going to get to it today, though. But yeah, when they have to work and do this, and that, and all I can think is why are they working? Like my wife works and she makes definitely more money than I do. That's fine. I don't care. She had that. Well, she didn't have that job, the job she has now. But um, you know, this is a system that was set up though a long time ago to displace men and put government in as their fathers, just like Jim Jones replaced the men and put himself in as their fathers. Christ said, "Call no man on your earth a father, and no man on this earth your teacher, except for Christ himself." Well, he said, "No man on this earth as father, there's except for the Father above, and no one your teacher but Christ." So, yeah, this goes through, and it's basically like these men expect their wives to be June Cleaver, and it's like, yes, we expect you to take care of children. We expect you to tap into your nurturing selves. But I don't really have time to dissect this today. I got to get out of here. I've been streaming for 3 hours, but I'll leave you with this. The people that synthesize our society are the same people that are in Hollywood molesting 13-year-old girls. An actress who starred in Marvel's Doctor Strange was convicted alongside her husband Tuesday of reportedly having sex. Not reportedly, she was convicted. Therefore, unless there is some sort of appeal and there's other evidence that they didn't do this, this isn't reportedly. This isn't allegedly. This is what they did. Having sex with a 13-year-old girl over a 3-year period. Sarah Fythen, I think that's the girl, a martial artist who played a sorcerer. No, okay. Let's see. So this is the lady. I don't really recognize her, but whatever. Maybe she just has a small bit. A martial artist who played a sorcerer alongside Benedict Cumberbatch in 2016 Marvel flick was unanimously convicted of 14 sex offenses against a child aged 13 to 15. Her husband, Victor, was also found guilty. Yeah. Folks, are you really going to listen to these people? Are you really going to treat them like gods? You know why people admire people in Hollywood? It's pretty simple. They're famous. That's it. They have money and they're famous, and therefore they're gods. And our media, our synthetic society, our manufactured society is pushing this out there on you and saying these are the exemplars of morals. And we just see it time and time again how that's not true. And especially this toxic femininity thing, which, the whole Amber Heard case right now is kind of important for that. Kind of important to understand that, yeah, I know everyone knows it. I know real life people understand it and they get it. But it's kind of important for the brainwashed lemmings. And I'm watching the trial here and there, and every time I mean, the TikToks are amazing. We're probably going to do a whole show Wednesday on this. I don't know. But I've lived it. I've had probably 10 girlfriends just like Amber Heard. I've never had one crap on my bed, but I mean, it's unreal. It's unreal. But the problem was with me. I mean, the problem was with them. Don't get me wrong. But the problem was with me for attracting and allowing women like that to be in my life. Because I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't in the right place. I hadn't had myself figured out. I didn't know my boundaries. And it's like, I just tell my wife now. I just tell her, and I'm not trying to fight with her. I'm not trying to be mean or cruel or anything. It's just like what you just did. Yesterday, I got upset with her because I didn't sleep well. I woke up and we had somewhere to be, and I asked her, and she seemed really snappy to me, and she did it again, and then like a third time, and I finally went, "You're not doing this. I'm simply asking you a question. I am not in the mood. I'm barely awake, and you're not allowed to treat me like this." It's disrespectful. It's wrong, and you would be just as mad if the roles were reversed. And see, that goes back to not do what thou willst, but do unto others. Because, folks, that is the golden rule. And a lot of these people have been hurt or feel some perceived hurt, and retribution is what they want. And that's all that this boils down to. But that's all I have for today, guys. Let me check chat real quick, make sure there's no paid chats, because I at least want to get them in. Sorry to Hari. I know you've been chatting, dude, but I did have a lot to read today. So otherwise I'd go through all this stuff you sent me. But maybe I'll rewatch the stream later with the chat on, and so I can follow it. Because I've been in the habit of rewatching my streams lately, even though I didn't do it for a while. But that is it for me, guys. I do need to get out of here. I need to get on with my day. It's 6 p.m. And, there's dinners to be had. There's evening time to be spent with my family. And, I need to relax. It's the first day off I've had since Wednesday. And wasn't up to do the show Wednesday, and Tank had to call off. So, but I appreciate y'all being here. Nice to catch you on today. Yeah, Shelly, come rewatch the show. I think it was a pretty good one. But yeah, stuff's been going on. It's hard. And if you caught my wife just coming in here, it's like I said, until I can get like my own like studio area, I've thought about doing the garage. I've thought about different things, but I just can't stream all the time. It just is what it is. And it's what it is. I'll leave it there. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.
You the left pedos, the left the 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 pedos, pedo. That's all people should hear when they think of left-wing